So we're back again for one of my favorite episodes talking about imposter syndrome. And I have kind of retermed it, or I call it just the fear of being found out, because in my mind, that just makes more sense. And when I broke it down, like, what are you really afraid of? To me, it came as like the fear of being like caught or being found out, which sounds so funny and sounds so weird. I was initially talking about it in a different context with some of my friends, but when I thought about it further, I realized how it applied in my life concerning imposter syndrome and just seeing its ugly, stupid head pop up in different scenarios. I'm just like, I'm realizing that this is just an ongoing battle or an ongoing issue that you consistently have to address because your self esteem and your confidence and all these things will always be challenged so long as you are alive, so long as you are doing work, producing, adding value, interacting with people. And on the flip side is always, on the flip side is the thing of affirming yourself and, doing affirmations. I think this might have actually been my first episode ever. I can't remember exactly. I know that my first episode was with my friend Dorcas. And we talked about we talked about positive affirmations, and I think imposter syndrome. I know I talked about imposter syndrome another time, but I feel like this was my first ever episode because feeling like an imposter is just an ongoing battle and just not feeling good enough or being afraid that people will see your deficiencies and people will discover or find out that you're not as competent as you say you are put forth. But the funny thing is that people that experience the most imposter syndrome are actually like none of that actually applies. It actually doesn't make sense because people that experience the most imposter syndrome don't actually put themselves out there as they're the best and they're, like they might produce those results and they might show and exemplify that they're high performers and they get things done and they're really excellent in their work, but they don't say that they're not very outspoken with those things. But the mind will convince you that people think this and have this expectation of you, and so if you don't meet that, then people are going to find out that you're a failure or that you're not actually what you quote said you were but didn't actually say that you were. So it's a very messed up thing. It's a very messed up thing in the mind. It's a very messed up thing in the emotions, with your self-esteem, with what you think about yourself. And something that the latter half of this year has taught me is this whole thing of false humility, throw it all away. Not bigging up yourself is just like, what are you doing? What was I doing? There's sometimes that I look back, some situations that I look back and I'm just like, no, because you really should have stood 10 toes down on who you know that you are. And not, it's definitely not a pride thing because I can even be proud at that time. I didn't even fully know who I was. To be proud, you really got to know what you got. You really got to know what you're capable of. I was just confused. And sometimes I really think like you really let people play on you. And there's a difference between letting people play on you or play with you when you let them know or that they're doing that. And when you don't know, when you're being naive or you're just aloof to what's going on and how people are playing with you, compared to when you're just like, no, like I know myself, I'm good. I'll allow you to do this. I'll allow you to act out. Like, it's kind of like when a child is misbehaving to the parent or to the adult and the parent's like, okay, like I know my people, I know what I can do in the situation, but I'm gonna give you your time, I'm gonna give you your space. So there's like two different things. I was the one that was letting people play with me, not knowing, just being very aloof. And that really does something to your self esteem. And that really does something to how you value yourself. And so, one of my biggest takeaways for this year is to really big up yourself. Like, we can get to the point of learning how to balance what is pride and humility and all these things, and what is boasting in the Lord, all these things. But let's first acknowledge and understand where we're at, and then we can, because you're not going to get to a genuine place of humility if you don't know who you are, if you don't know what you're made of. How are you going to humble yourself? You have to humble yourself from a place. If you're already down in the dumps, you already think you're down in your dumps, you're not humbling yourself. Life humbled you. You didn't get a choice in this. Right? So, to me, as I work through imposter syndrome, one of my first steps, or one of my major steps, is really understanding who I am, and like what I'm all about. And the funniest thing is, I know a lot of people, because people have said this to me, and a lot of people see me, and this happens to a lot of women, I feel like, and a lot of Black women, where people will see you and maybe you're just more reserved. And Black women, we know how to put ourselves together. Women, we know how to, package ourselves very well. You're more reserved and you carry yourself very confidently, and that's really good. And I was just trained to do that. I saw my sisters doing that. I saw other women that I admired doing that, and that's just what I like. That's what I do. And so people will assume that you think too highly of yourself. Not even like highly, but they think you think too highly of yourself. And I'm just like, sometimes I say to myself, I'm just like, so people are lucky. People are lucky in this life that the Lord made me an introvert. Because anyhow, God made me an extrovert, and I was more outspoken about my accomplishments and about the things that I do, and, the things that God has blessed me with. My enemies would be sick and tired of me. Very sick and tired of me. So, imposter syndrome is really false humility, how I've come to understand it, because you're doubting yourself, and it's just like you're putting yourself at this place, and you haven't even allowed yourself to fully explore and actually come to terms and understand what you're capable of. And it's like you're already putting yourself down from a place from being down. You're already down, and you're putting yourself down more. And what I've actually realized is that some of the most successful, competent, hardworking, high producing people are often the most fearful, and they feel the most like imposters. And one of the big things that I've connected this back to was celebrating your wins and celebrating your successes. And if you know me, you know that that's something that I struggle with a lot. And if you don't know me, let me explain. So, something about me is that I kind of have this go, go, go mentality. I'm just like, okay, have this checklist. And I measure a lot of my success according to my accomplishments and the things that I've set out to do and my goals. And I also had this warped idea that your goals have to be met 100%. If they're not met 100%, it's a failure. 85% failure. And I've always kind of been like that. Like, I remember even in junior high, I was very competitive academically, like very competitive in high school, all throughout school, but junior high, like extremely competitive. And I think because I was also in a class with a lot of highly achieving students. And in my mind, I remember there was this one exam where I don't remember what went wrong, but I was typically like the top scorer. If not, I was top one or two, mostly one. But and there was this one time where like the group of people that we used to really compete on like exams and stuff like that, and we typically score around the same. I remember I think I got like the lowest out of the four of us or something like that. And I got a 91. I cried. Oh my gosh. I beat myself up so badly. And that's one memory that I have that's very vivid. I've had multiple experiences like that in my life where, and even in university, you kind of, you let something slide because it's already beating you up in different ways. It's already showing you pepper in different ways. But I was so extreme with my goals and with my standards of, success and excellence, and not fully embracing every win as, it's still a win. Like, this is still really good. And like, I would expand and highlight the times where I failed. Like, that time me crying was like, I was putting more emotion and more energy into my failures than I did when I was scoring 98s, when I was getting hundreds. Like, I was just like, oh yeah, like, it's like I was meant to do that. Like, I had to, like, I had no other choice. You do it, you succeed, you move on to the next one. Like, no time to pause and reflect and be like, wow, I actually studied really hard. I put a lot of effort. I did this, wow, this was a great accomplishment for me. Like, you did it again, Esther. Like, good job. Like, you're really pushing through. You're really growing. You're really trying. Like, I never stopped to do any of that. I never stopped to smell the flowers. Always zooming by the flowers, always on to the next one. And so it creates this false idea that you didn't actually achieve anything, and that this is just like a regular occurrence, just normal. And then when you fall short, that becomes where all your emotion and all your expressiveness goes into. And I ended up having like a lot of bursts, outbursts, and breakdowns, just feeling very frustrated with myself. And I find that I often feel like an imposter because I don't stop to celebrate when I've actually, succeeded and experienced these little victories and these big victories in my life. And I just, some things will happen on, like, people will be like, oh wow, like, congrats, you did this. And I'll just be like, oh, like, it's cool. Like, I remember even when I was speaking with one of my friends about this, I remember even after I met the prime minister last year, we came back and some things happened where we were acknowledged, myself and FOMA, who I went with and came back with. And I just remember feeling like, okay, guys, like, it happened. Like, stop talking about it. Like, I get very awkward around people like reminding me of my successes or reminding me of the things that I've accomplished and did. And like, I get like afraid. I don't know, maybe it's like a fear of like, if you guys remind me of what I've, succeeded in, then now you hold this expectation, and like, oh my gosh, this is like a big expectation that I have to now live up to again. So let's please everybody, like, don't talk about it, don't acknowledge it, just in case I fail next time. So you don't have anything to hold me to that standard, right? It's just so like, it's a very weird thing. So I remember like when we came back and for the first day, people talked about like, oh my gosh, and I was like, oh, like, there was the high for the first day, but I had a lot of great people around me that really wanted to celebrate that and really wanted to talk about it and like bask in it in a prolonged, like, after the fact. And I was just like, ugh, stop talking about it. Like, one of my friends, like, she would call me, oh, governor, this is that, like, every time she's trying to big me up. And I'm just like this false humility, this weird way of like, oh, don't talk about it. When in me, I wasn't fully settled, or maybe I didn't feel like I was worthy of those accolades or being affirmed in that way. And that the first thing obviously is because I never affirmed myself in that way. I never like sat down to really think like, hey, like, you actually did that. Like, that's pretty cool. That's pretty awesome. And you put yourself into something, you put yourself out there, and you got a great opportunity, and you took it by the reins and you went with it. Like, I never actually sat to fully bask in that. And so when now people come to expect this of me, it's like I get, very anxious and afraid of, oh my gosh, what if I fail? And what if this happens? And the funny thing is I look back on all these times where I felt like an imposter, or I felt like I didn't do that great of a job, or people were gonna see that I'm not as competent as they may have thought, or as I may have persuaded them to think. None of those things came true. None of those instances ever actually happened. Like, I can't recall a single time where I convinced myself that I was not able to do something, that I was not capable, that I was not qualified, where I actually went and did that thing and I wasn't qualified, or I wasn't capable of doing it, or people looked back and said, "Oh, we should have never give her that job." Like, there's never been a scenario, there's never been an instance like that. And so this whole thing of feeling like an imposter really starts with acknowledging and, affirming yourself and bigging up yourself. Like, I'm so sorry, but from here on out, it started before this, but let me, for those listening, from here on out, it's actually not the time to play with me anymore, because as I really sit down and get to know myself more and really start to reflect and think and acknowledge what I'm capable of and just who I am mentally, emotionally, spiritually, as a friend, as a employee, like my personality, my looks, everything, it's really not time to play anymore. And that has probably been the biggest thing that has helped me overcome this imposter syndrome, because it's just like, I know that I go around, and even if, hypothetically, even if I was to do something and fail, like do my worst at it, I've seen many people do that. I've seen many people try something and fail. And I never look at them and be like, oh my God, like, you should have never done that. And you should have, Mr. Trump, y'all's president, has failed many times. Countries fail many times. They fail their citizens many times, and they carry on and they still run for re-election. Like, they have enough confidence to bounce back and to pretend like things never happen, we see people that I know there's a thing of like the worst singers that did the American anthem and stuff like that. They do that, voice cracking up. Alicia Keys, when she was at the Super Bowl, voice cracking up. They wiped it clean, tried to make us think it never happened. Fergie, they'll move on and keep creating music. Like, you will move on, and most times people will forget about it because they're focused on the next worst thing that happened or the next best thing. And it's just like this idea that it's going to stay in people's minds and people are going to remember this of you. Like, it's such a lie and it's so fake. And I realize, like, I really have to create systems, especially because it's not in my nature. I've acknowledged that it's not in my nature to talk a lot about the things that I've done and to talk about my accomplishments and talk about myself in all these ways. It's not in my nature to do that. So I have to create systems that, like, after this happens, I have to sit down and really examine it. And actually, as I'm going through certain things, like, I really have to capture the moments to remember where I came from and to remember where the energy and the things that I put into it. Like, even throughout this book process, once the book is released this month, I will share some of the, photos and videos that I captured along the way, of times where, like, I was overwhelmed, times where I finally hit one of my, like, some of my goals, and I was celebrating. And just that, having those memories is really important for me. Otherwise, I'll get to the end of it and just, like, forget everything. Like, I don't know about other people, but sometimes my memory cannot keep all of those things in, and I genuinely forget what the process looked like. So if you were to ask me to, like, do this thing again, it's almost like I would forget that I already did it and I'm already capable of these things, right? And even, God had this process as he was creating the world in creation. He would stop and look at his work in Genesis 1. He would stop and look at his work and said, I don't know if it was after he said the Lord created the firmaments, but he would stop and look at his work each time and say, and he saw it and it was good. We can go to Genesis 1. And, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Verse 4, verse 3. Then God said, let there be light, and there was light. And God saw the light, and that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. So, and God saw the light. He saw what he created. And he said that it was good. He affirmed, round of applause to us. Like, we did that. Like, it was good, right? And in that, if you're afraid of, oh, what if I'm always, saying this and people are getting tired of me, let people get tired of you, one. But the thing that you also remember to do, and this is between you and God, and this is based on your heart posture, is going back and acknowledging. As I say all these things, I'm not bigging up myself, knowing that it was just me, myself, and I that did this. Like, I acknowledge the people that helped me. Like, as I say for my job, for example, like, wow, you really put yourself out there. This was something that you probably wouldn't have done just regularly. Like, good for you. You put yourself out there. You did it. You got the job. And I'll sit and think about the people that helped me. Like, wow, God, I'm so grateful for this person you placed in my life. Wow, they helped me in this ways. Like, they taught me these things. Their words of encouragement really boosted me. Like, thank you, God, for these opportunities. That's returning the glory back to God, returning the glory where it belongs, that he deserves all the glory. And you put these in systems if you don't naturally do this, because it's easy to forget. And then, you end up back doubting yourself, or you end up in pride, God forbid. So I have learned that imposter syndrome really is that false humility, and really can be killed by just consistently acknowledging, setting up a healthy system to consistently acknowledge how you are moving forward and seeing your growth. Some of the easiest things that I'm able to, balance that fear or that imposter syndrome is, what are some things that I said were definite no's, and things that I would definitely not do 5 years ago, or that I definitely thought I would not be able to do 5 years ago, 2 years ago. And then, do you still have the same answer to those? And it's just like, if the answer is no, then you can already say that you've grown as a person. You can already say you're more competent. You can already say you're more capable. You can already say you're more wiser. You can already say a lot of things about yourself to really help boost your self-esteem. And this year, I think one of the books that really helped me to push myself and to acknowledge my capabilities, and to not let imposter syndrome steal opportunities away from me, was Go for No. That it's a pretty short book, but it's a really powerful, compact book. And one of the quotes that really stays with me, and I carry this quote, I remind myself of this every day, is that your comfort zone is not static. It's either growing, it's either increasing, or it's shrinking, it's decreasing. Your comfort zone is never static. You cannot remain in a place that is comfortable and think that things in your life progression is going to remain the same. You're either going to, fall back into a smaller comfort zone because fear will convince you that even the things that you're doing regularly are, too much for you. But if you keep moving forward, you keep enlarging your comfort zone, you're taking on new opportunities, you're stepping into yourself more. Your comfort zone is never static and never remains the same. You're either moving forward, enlarging it, or you're decreasing it and moving backwards. And another thing is, what is your failure quotient? Because this is a huge thing that stops a lot of people who experience imposter syndrome, is the fear of failure. Like I said, the fear of being found out that you're a failure. And so every day, I'll ask myself, like, what is your failure quotient? What can you handle? How much failure can you handle today? How much failure is going to push you to grow, is going to challenge your mindset, is going to expand your capabilities, and how much is going to, potentially harm you or lead to burnout or frustration or discouragement. So it's finding that healthy balance with what can you push yourself to, how much failure can you handle, so high enough, and then low enough. Just being able to ask myself that every single day helps me to balance that idea that like I'm a failure, I'm an imposter, I'm not capable, all these things. So that's something that I really want to talk about in this episode. And yeah, the more I meditate on it, I'm just like, wow. Imposter syndrome really has to go before the end of this year. Like we're not entering the next year with this. We can't keep going in this cycle because there's so much more to do. And it's so hard to set goals in line with what God has for you if you're not fully confident. And if you're not fully there yet, then, admit that to God and let him help you. Gideon admitted it when the Lord said, are you afraid? Or he said, like, if you're afraid, do this. He was afraid. So he took the steps that he knew that he can handle, and he let God help him and carry him through that fear and carry him to see that success. But another thing is, like, if Gideon didn't look back and see and acknowledge what God did through him, then he'd fall back into that fear and back into that mindset that he can't do that. So this year, we're ending this year and we're ending the cycle of imposter syndrome. If you feel what I'm feeling, say amen in the comments.